Hello and welcome to Moonlane TV. I'm Tọlá Okogwu.
Hello, and my name is Jasmine Richards, and together we are
Lola
Lola
Morayo,
Morayo,
author of Aziza Secret
Secret
Fairy
Fairy.
Lore.
We were trying to do that at the same
Together.
time. It kind of worked.
But yeah, technology hasn't quite got to the point, and we're not actresses, so
Yeah.
but I hope you guys, you heard what we were trying to say. We are the authors of Aziza's Secret Fairy Door. It's a new book that we've written together. It's due to come out today. It publishes today. I have previously written picture books. I wrote the Daddy Do My Hair book series. And I also have a new series, a middle grade series called Onyeka and the Academy of the Sun, coming out in 2022.
Whoop, whoop. Yes, and I've been writing for over 10 years now. So I've written some books that you may have heard of. So I'm one of the writers in the Beast Quest series. So you may have come across those. I also write on a series called PJ Masks, which you may have watched, or you may have grown out of that now because you're big kids. And my novel called The Unmorrow Curse is also coming out next year. So that's super exciting. So we've been very busy.
Yes.
Very, very busy.
Those are the books that we've written before, but we came together to write this new book, and we think it's pretty amazing. So we're really excited to introduce you all to this new world that we've created, featuring Aziza and her special friends from a place called Shimmerton.
So to tell you a little bit about our lovely Aziza. So she lives in a city flat with her mum and her dad and her older brother called Otis. And Otis is really forgetful, always losing stuff, and she has to try and use her detective skills to find those things. And the thing is, Aziza's family are obsessed with superheroes. Okay, so her mum and dad actually write a graphic novel about a superhero called Jamal Justice, but Aziza is the only one in her house who's really into fairies, and she actually loves a series of books called Fairy Power. More than anything, she would love to meet a fairy. That is the thing she'd absolutely love. So on her birthday, a mysterious fairy door turns up at her house. And no one can tell her where it's come from, but she sort of works really hard all day. She puts it all together and she decorates it. And there's a piece of paper in with the fairy door, and it says, "Put me by a tree and fairy magic you will see." And Aziza's a bit like, okay, because I live in a flat, so I don't have a tree nearby, but I do have a pot plant. So she has a lovely peace lily in her room. So she puts the fairy door by the pot plant. She waits to see if there's any magic. Nothing happens. She's a bit disappointed. Then she goes to bed. Then that night there's a knock, knock, knock on the door, on the fairy door. And well, you're going to have to wait and see what happens next. But that's a little bit about Aziza. And on the other side of that door is this magical place called Shimmerton, which is very much inspired by lots of the sort of fairy tales and myths that we like, but also ones that we don't know so much about. So we're really interested in looking around the world and all of the wonderful different stories and thinking about how we could bring in all of those threads to create a brand new world for you all to enjoy.
Because Aziza herself, the inspiration from her comes from a West African fairy called Aziza, so she's directly influenced by that. And I'm from a West African background, and so it was super exciting to me to delve into the mythology of my culture, which not that many people know about. So it's really exciting to be able to spotlight a lot of these different cultures and the creatures that come from them. They're super interesting creatures. And Aziza, this book is just the first in the series, and we can't wait for you guys to meet all the new and different and exciting and maybe a little scary sometimes.
Why don't you? I think you should do a little reading now, and so we can get to see a bit of Aziza.
I think that would be a fantastic idea. I'd love to do a reading, but before I do, I have to mention that the book is illustrated by an amazing artist called Cory Reid. He's just phenomenal. The life that he's breathed into the characters. Like, I remember the first time I saw Aziza, I saw her friends, I saw Shimmerton. It felt so real. And it's so quirky as well, his style, and it just brought everything to life. So Cory Reid is just phenomenal, and I can't wait for you guys to see the illustrations because I think it just adds to the wonder of the story. So before I start reading, let me tell you where we're going to read from, because I'm going to do an extract. So before where I start reading, just to give you an idea of what's happened before, Aziza's received her fairy door. She has decorated it. She had a little bit of problem with it, but she overcame those problems. She's now put the fairy door by her peace lily called Lil, and she's super hopeful and anticipating that something will happen as promised. And so it's bedtime. She's been tucked in, had her stories, and she's in bed, and then something happens. So let's find out what happens. Aziza sat up and rubbed her eyes, just as another knock echoed through the room. She looked at the fairy door. It was shuddering, as if something was banging from the other side. Aziza padded over to it. Knock, knock, knock. No way, Aziza thought. Is the door actually magical? Aziza hesitated for a moment, then carefully reached out for the stick-on gem doorknob with her thumb and index finger. Warmth shot through her hand, up her arm, and then through her whole body. She felt like a bottle of fizzy water that had been shaken up. The door was growing, and the shiny doorknob now filled Aziza's whole hand. Even the lily seemed to be getting bigger. Aziza gripped the doorknob tighter as she realized something. The world around me isn't growing. I'm shrinking. Aziza stared at the doorknob, which looked just like a real jewel now, glittering and bright. With a twist of her wrist and a gentle tug, the door swung open. A golden beam of light flooded through, bathing Aziza in its warmth. It felt like an invitation. Aziza took a deep breath and, with a final glance back at her bedroom, stepped through the doorway. Aziza's head was filled with the sound of her heartbeat. It was like a drum that kept speeding up. The golden light faded, and she found herself in a sprawling space with a high ceiling, twisting corridors, and lots of shelves stuffed with toys. Whoa, she breathed. Each shelf displayed something that Aziza wanted to play with immediately, from ginormous teddy bears with friendly smiles to the little towns and cities made of blocks. She spotted some itty-bitty dolls so small that Aziza couldn't imagine anyone playing with them, not anyone the same size as her anyway. What is this place? Aziza asked herself. She looked behind her at the fairy door, which glowed brightly next to a stone wall. It was giving nothing away. A tiny hot air balloon floated past with an even smaller action figure in the basket. Hey, was the action figure waving? Aziza wondered. A train track was laid out on a nearby table, and steam engines whizzed around it. Small puffs of steam drifted above the train set like miniature marshmallow clouds and escaped through one of the room's high windows. In one corner, a towering ballerina made of bronze spun in a slow pirouette atop a music box. She winked at Aziza. Aziza winked back and stepped towards the giant toy, just as something hard and round and very slippery rolled under her foot. Ah! Aziza's arms windmilled as she lost her balance, but then a strange fluttering feeling spread across her back, and she was standing upright again. She glanced over her shoulder. Glitter sticks! She had actual fairy wings, just like the characters in her fairy power books. Scrap that, these were far better. They were beautiful orange and black butterfly wings. Her pajamas had been replaced by a really pretty dress, and touching her head, Aziza realized that her silk bedtime scarf was gone as well. That fairy door really has changed everything, she marveled. But what made me slip? Aziza searched the floor and spotted a large blue marble rolling away across the ground. A twinkling light swirled inside it, like a tiny galaxy. Cool. Aziza tried to fly over to it, but her wings only gave the littlest flutter. Her feet didn't even leave the floor. So actual proper flying is going to take practice, she realized. Walking would have to do for now. Aziza followed the marble a little way down the corridor. As she got closer to it, she heard the sound of arguing and ducked behind one of the tall shelves. Aziza peeked out from behind a stack of jigsaw boxes and saw 3 fairies who appeared to be the same age as her. They were standing around a huge barrel, glaring at one another. The barrel had a sign that said, "Lucky dip, 1 whisk pop ago." "You're forgetting I'm in charge," said a blue-haired fairy with beetle-type wings that shone green, blue, and gold. She crossed her arms. "That means I get to look in the lucky dip again." "That's not fair, Kendra," the fairy next to her replied. Her pink afro billowed around her face in a pretty riot of springy coils. "Noon's right," piped up the 3rd fairy. She had moth wings. "Why is every turn your turn?" "Sorry, Felly, I can't really hear anything except an annoying buzzing sound." Kendra leant into the barrel and began rooting about. "Hold my legs," she commanded in a muffled voice. "I don't see why she can't fly, lazy wings," Felly said. But Noon shrugged, and they took hold of Kendra's shiny black boots. Soon, wooden toy soldiers, glittery key rings, shiny whistles, and blue marbles were being scattered around the room as Kendra dug through the barrel. Aziza spotted a couple of marbles bounce off her fairy door, which was still glowing in the far corner of the room. The marbles made a loud thudding sound as they hit the wood. So that's what was knocking on the door, Aziza thought to herself. She stood up behind the jigsaws. "Come on, Aziza, stop being so shy. Introduce yourself." Sure, Kendra seems a little grumpy, but they're real life fairies, and maybe they'll teach you to fly, and then you'll be friends. And why are we even wasting our time with this silly lucky dip? Belly grumbled. "There are loads of other things here we should be testing out." "You're right," Noon agreed. "And we're not even really supposed to be in the storeroom, are we? We should get a move on and take the toys we want." Aziza frowned. "Not supposed to be back here in the storeroom," she repeated to herself. "Take the toys?" I'm going to stop there. You'll have to get the book to find out what that's all about.
Oh my gosh, that is the first time I've heard it read by you.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I really enjoyed that. I wonder what happens next.
I know. I really enjoyed reading it. As I said, it's so, I mean, as a parent, I both enjoyed writing it, but I love reading it. I'm going to love reading it to my daughters. I know my daughters are going to love reading it. So yeah, it's such a super fun book.
Oh, it really is. Okay, so we've had a reading and there's been lots of talk about fairy doors. And you're very talented when it comes to crafts.
Yes,
right?
yes. So
Me,
I
maybe
kind
less
of,
so.
yeah. Well, I mean, I like YouTube videos. YouTube videos are very useful. But yeah, I thought I would try my hand at making my very own fairy door. And in true Blue Peter style, here's one I made earlier.
Woo!
Yeah, so I mean it's super simple, but this fairy door is sort of my doorway into another world, much like Aziza's fairy door is her doorway into Shimmerton. And we have a special activity that we want you guys to try. But first, you're gonna need to make one of these for yourself. So we're gonna switch to a quick tutorial to show you how you can do just that. And we're back, and you should all have your very own fairy doors now. So I'm going to let Jasmine tell you the activity that we'd like you to do now that you have your own door. And by the way, your doors look amazing.
Yeah. Very good. So listen, everyone. So my confession is, like I was saying earlier, I'm not massively crafty. So this is one that I bought earlier. And it's still to decorate, but I thought I'd share it because I think it's really useful to have like the door in your hand when we're going to do these next activities. And it's all about what you see through the fairy door, right? So when you open it up, what's on the other side? Hey there! What's on the other side? And when you're writing stories, and the thing I want you to remember is writing stories, and sorry for parents or teachers that hear this, okay? But I don't care about spelling, all right? I just want you to have a good time writing. Get the words down, and get your story down. So, but when you're writing a story, one of the things that you can do as a writer is try and put yourself in the shoes of the character. So one of the things that I would get you to do and to think about is either as Aziza or yourself. So you found yourself shrinking down, you're walking across the threshold of that door, and you've come through to the other side. Using your 5 senses, what can you see? What can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell? I mean, what is there? Is there a taste in the air? Maybe you've walked straight onto the beach and you can sort of taste the sea, the salty sea air. What can you hear? When you use your senses, your writing comes to life. So whenever you're doing creative writing, a really good place to start is using your 5 senses to try and build that world. Okay, so that's your 5 senses. Another thing that you can do is think about what type of world you've walked into. Now, some of you may have heard a word called genre before. Some of you may not have. It doesn't matter. Genre just means a type of story. What type of story is this? Is this a fantasy story? Is this an adventure story? Is this a sci-fi or a space story? Is it a horror story? Is it really funny? Is it really funny and silly? So what kind of genre or what kind of story are you walking through when you go through that fairy door? So for Aziza, this is an adventure story, and there's a little bit of fantasy and a little bit of fairy tale, but it was really important to both of us that it was funny. So sometimes when you talk about genre, you can end up mixing and mashing all those things together. It doesn't ever have to be just one thing. So when you're writing your story, think, what type of story do I want this to be? Okay. Now, a really, really important thing to think about when writing is what is the challenge that your main character is going to encounter. So I'm going to use a big word now, and it's antagonist. So who is going to be the antagonist? An antagonist, another way of saying that, is the baddie. Who is the baddie? So in Aziza, and they're not really full-on baddies, but our baddies are kind of like the gigglers. They are the challenge, the thing that Aziza has to get past. But sometimes an antagonist doesn't even need to be a person. Sometimes it can be something like the weather. So sometimes you can read whole stories where bad weather is the antagonist, or it's a volcano erupting, that's the antagonist. But the whole thing about story is about overcoming challenges. That's the engine. Imagine an engine in the car. Conflict and getting past stuff, and each thing should be a little bit more difficult. You can't start with a really difficult thing and then an easy thing. That doesn't make any sense. You've got to go this way. So who's your antagonist on the other side of that fairy door? And then lastly, because we are so keen on mythology and fairy tales and all of those things, is to think about, and this is another thing, and again, sorry teachers and parents, but when it comes to creative writing, it's okay to steal, okay? Steal your inspiration, and then put your twist on it. So sometimes it's easier to say, I'm going to walk, my fairy door is going to take me into the world of Cinderella. That is absolutely fine. Grown-up writers do that all the time, don't they? Right? They do that all the time.
Yes,
so
we do.
It can be the jungle bit, it can be Cinderella, it can be whatever you want to be, but make sure that once you get into that world, you make it your own. So what ingredients are you going to put in? What ingredients are you going to take out? And how are you going to make it yours? So those are some ideas to use when writing your own story about crossing the threshold of fairy-dom.
Oh, I'm so excited for you guys. I think you're going to have so much fun doing that activity. But, you know, we are so incredibly excited for this story to get out there, for you guys to meet Aziza and her crew. And also for you guys, you know, much like with this activity with stories, to start to think of your own worlds and this kind of creatures you would like to meet. And when you do write your stories and you do make your doors, then by all means do take a picture. And you know, you can find us on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, and even our website. You can send us an email and share. We want to see these amazing stories and these amazing doors that you create, and we're really looking forward to seeing those.
Fantastic. We've loved spending our launch day with you guys. Look forward to hearing what you've got to say about Aziza's secret fairy door, and we'll see you on the other side.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Okay.